Hooray! Hooray! Very good. So, let's start again. Where were we? What is life? What is life for? What is life for? What is life about? What should we do with our life? What really matters in life? And these are big questions, and these are questions I've been asking most of my life, and maybe you have as well. But particularly when I was in my 20s, I was asking these questions. And at the time, I was working at an advertising agency in Newcastle. And I remember kind of questions like this were kind of going through my head. And then the phone rang one day, and it was my client, one of my clients who worked for a building society, and he had a different question. His question was, where are my leaflets? And I remember it very well because his leaflets were late. They were launching a new product. I was arranging for the leaflets to get printed, and there'd been some kind of delay and they weren't ready. And I just realised I really didn't care about the leaflets. It just didn't seem important at all that the leaflets weren't ready, because there were just much bigger things that were really important. And I said that to the client. I had this conversation where I said to him, I don't think it really matters if the leaflets are late. And like, no one's going to die because the leaflets are late, are they? And it was quite unprofessional. And at the time, I kind of probably didn't appreciate that. But he took it quite well. He said, yeah, I think you're right. I don't think it really matters, does it? So I think I was remembering that this morning because it was a kind of around a turning point in my life where I kind of started to realise certain things aren't important, but other things really do matter. And there's big questions in life, and we need to ask those big questions. And as a result of turning those questions over, I went on a search, really. I started to search for truth, for answers, and for meaning, and that led me to find the Dharma, to find Buddhism. Not long after that, like 12 months after that, when I came back to Sheffield. So Sangha, the founder of our order, our movement, went on a similar quest, well, very different quest to mine, but his own quest, searching for the Dharma, searching for Buddhism. And that took him as a teenager to read ancient Buddhist texts and join different groups, write articles about Buddhism. In his 20s, he deserted the army and became a monk in India, wandering through India in search of the Dharma, in search of Buddhism. And then that was in the 40s. And then in the 1960s, it led him back to the UK, where he founded a new Buddhist movement, a new Buddhist order in 1967, the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order in 1967, which has become the Triratna Buddhist Order. And then 9 years after that, he gave a series of seminal lectures. It was a lecture series called Buddhism for Today and Tomorrow. And there were 4 lectures that he gave, but they were seen as being really, really key lectures in our history. And they were called the Brighton Lectures. And because it's 50 years ago since they were first given, and they were so important, they've been re-released as a new book called Buddhism for Today and Tomorrow. And right across Triratna, all across the world, in Triratna Buddhist centres like this one, there's Buddhist centres like this all over the world. Triratna centres, we're having this theme of Buddhism for today and tomorrow, and that's why over spring and summer we'll be exploring these 4 key lectures. And I'm really excited about it because I think they're really, really important lectures, and there's loads to explore. And in the lecture, the first lecture in the introduction, Sangha says, during these 4 lectures, we shall be trying to present the concentrated essence of Buddhism in a highly practical form, a form especially suited to the needs of the West, needs which are fast becoming the needs of the whole world. That sounds great, doesn't it? The concentrated essence of Buddhism in a highly practical form. And you could say, really, that's what Triratna has become 50 years later, is a highly concentrated essence of Buddhism in a really practical form that's suitable to the needs of the modern world. I think so, anyway. But we'll be exploring that in the weeks to come. And those lectures inspired people at the time who were around, and they went on to found Buddhist centres all across the world, really, from the 1970s onwards. And in the 1980s, order members came to Sheffield and began to teach classes in Sheffield. And then in 1993, the Sheffield Buddhist Centre charity was created. I was just looking at the minutes of that meeting yesterday. And then in 2001, 25 years ago, we bought this building. And a really small Sangha, a small community, and a small number of order members bought this building, kind of worried that they wouldn't be able to fill it. And then now, 25 years later, it's full most evenings and the courses that we run. So during the course of this series, we're going to be looking back 50 years at those lectures and saying, well, what do they communicate to us for Buddhism today and tomorrow? And also looking ahead to the next 25 years and be thinking, well, what can we achieve in Sheffield over the next 25 years? Look what's happened in the past 25 years. What could happen in the coming 25 years? So I'm really excited about this lecture series. And in the lecture series, Sangha Akshita presents 4 things that Buddhism offers, 4 gifts that Buddhism offers to individuals that they really need, And it's gifts that meet that longing, that searching that I had back in Newcastle back 23 years ago. There was this longing really for something more. I knew that there was something more to life, this longing, this urge to grow really, or to find meaning, but not knowing where to express or how to express that. And Buddhism offers 4 responses to that, 4 gifts to people in that situation. And in the lectures, Sangha Akshita says, well, you people, they'd hired out Brighton Pavilion, and gave public lectures, and said, well, you people coming to this lecture must have a similar urge. You must be looking to grow, otherwise you wouldn't have come. And I think the same is true for all of us here. We're all looking for something, looking for meaning, looking to grow. And Buddhism offers 4 gifts in response to that. So a year later, after those lectures, Sangha Akshita kind of disappeared. He went on sabbatical for a year and just left the small number of order members just to run things, which they weren't expecting. And he wrote a poem called 4 Gifts. And it expresses these things that Buddhism offers in a more symbolic, poetic form. So I'll read this poem to you. I come to you with 4 gifts. The first gift is a lotus flower. Do you understand? My second gift is a golden net. Can you recognize it? My third gift is a shepherd's round dance. Do your feet know how to dance? My fourth gift is a garden planted in a wilderness. Could you work there? I come to you with 4 gifts. Dare you accept them? So 4 gifts, but there's a challenge as well as an invitation. Dare you accept these gifts? There's this urge, there's this longing to grow, but is that really what you want? Dare you accept that? Okay. So the first gift is what we're going to be looking at this evening and over the next coming weeks. As Paranita said, the first gift is a lotus flower. Do you understand? If you do, I'll stop the lecture and we can go home. But I'll say a bit more because presumably we don't yet understand. So the first gift is a lotus flower. Do you understand? So the lotus is a symbol, and it's a symbol used often in Buddhism, but it's a symbol of growth. It's a symbol of this urge to grow and awaken. Plants, it's kind of giving them human quality that they might not have, but assuming plants have this urge, this kind of longing to grow. And the Buddha had this vision. Well, in fact, the Buddha did put human qualities onto plants, because when he was enlightened, it said that he had a vision of all humanity, all living beings, being as lotus flowers. And they all were trying to grow. They all had this urge to grow. It's given expression to this urge we have to grow, to find meaning, to become wiser. And all the different lotuses were growing at different stages of development, and they were all trying to find a way out towards the sun. They were growing in some water. Some of them were submerged at the bottom. Some were growing towards the water, and some had broken free of the water and were opening out, blossoming before the sun. So the lotus is this symbol of growth and of movement in the direction of something higher, a response to the light, to this warmth of the sun. And it's a symbol of growth. And Sangha Akshita says, well, this is a symbol for personal development. And the first lecture, he calls it a method of personal development. And he says that all human beings, all life has this urge to grow. But if it doesn't find expression, or if we don't know what to do with it, if it becomes frustrated, it leads to suffering. And we see that across society. Loads and loads of people don't know how to give expression to this urge to grow, to find meaning, and it creates suffering in the world. So what Buddhism offers is a method to grow, a method of personal development, a method to grow lotus flowers, you could say. That's what Buddhism offers. The whole of Buddhism is aimed at that. It's aimed at growing this lotus flower within us, growing our potential. And Sangha Night says, well, all the things that Buddhism offers indirectly lead to this growth in consciousness. It says it's all about growing higher and higher, ever higher levels of consciousness. But he says the most direct way of doing this is meditation. Meditation is working directly on the mind, directly on consciousness. And this is the direct method of personal development. So the first gift that Buddhism offers is meditation, but not just meditation, a system of meditation, instructions, a path that leads to growth, that leads to personal development, growth in consciousness. But then do you understand? Do you understand? That's what Sangha Night asks. Maybe that's what the Buddha's asking. Do you really understand? And that question is worth reflecting on, and we can be over the next few weeks. What are the implications of that question? Does it mean, do you understand how to meditate? And we'll be looking at, over the coming weeks, we'll be giving instruction, we'll be talking in our groups, how to meditate. It's not straightforward, is it? And talking with other people could help. So we'll be asking that question, do you understand how to meditate? Do you understand what meditation really is for? And there's a lot of misconceptions, and sometimes people meditate for hedonism to get like a rush or a kind of really great experience, but that isn't what meditation is for. Meditation is to develop, Buddhist meditation is to develop our consciousness to higher and higher levels. Do you understand how potent meditation can be, how life-changing, how transformative meditation can be? These are some of the questions we can be pondering and reflecting. That invitation, dare you accept the invitation, dare you accept the lotus flower, and do you understand it? So the next thing I think I want to do is talk you through one way that Sangha Night has looked at this personal development, how individuals grow, how lotuses grow. And it's a traditional Buddhist teaching that isn't known so well, and Sangha Night drew it out in one of his seminars. I think it's really, really useful kind of structure to look at personal development. You probably won't be able to see it because the lectern's in the way and you're too far away. But don't worry, because I'll read it out to you and I'll explain what it all means. So it's the 5 great stages of the Dharma life, the 5 great stages. It's a way of describing this journey we go on in the Dharma life. And I've used different colours, so I'll explain that as well. So the first stage is integration. The second great stage is positive emotion. They're both coloured in red marker pen. And then the third great stage is called spiritual death. The fourth stage is called spiritual rebirth. And the final stage is called spontaneous compassionate activity. So this marks the stages that traditionally one would go through on the spiritual journey, culminating in Buddhahood, in enlightenment, which is known here as spontaneous compassionate activity. And I really like that description of the goal of Buddhism, is that you just spontaneously act for the benefit of other people. And the last series where we looked at the Buddha, you could see that in the stories of the Buddha, how he just spontaneously react for the benefit of other people. I'm just going to briefly explain why I've used different colours, and I'll say more about that later. It's because at the earlier stages of the spiritual life, we're working with karma processes. The way we transform our mind and grow our consciousness is using the law of karma. We shape our mind through meditation and through the practice of the 5 precepts and all the things we do, and we're transforming our mind using karma processes. But there becomes a big turning point in the spiritual life called spiritual death, where we see clearly what Sangha Gita earlier called the big mistake. I was talking to Sangha Gita about this earlier, and she described it as the big mistake. It's a mistaken view that we are a fixed self at the center of the world, separated from everything else. And that causes so much suffering and so much dukkha, so much, so many consequences play out from that big mistake. When we see through that, there comes into play a whole other set of processes which we could call Dharma processes, and it's more about cooperating with them. I'm going to say more about this later, but it kind of sets the scene for what we're going to talk about later. So 5 great stages of personal development. We've got a method of personal development symbolized by the lotus. The method is a direct method, is meditation. But individually, we go through these 5 great stages culminating in Buddhahood. Most of us are going to be working in stages 1 and 2 in this red marker pen, integration and positive emotion. But it's helpful to know the whole of the Buddhist path that is laid out really clearly. And I think it not only explains Buddhism, I find it really helpful. It makes sense, so clear, it makes sense of other religions for me as well, and other schools of Buddhism. You can really see that. For example, spiritual death and spiritual rebirth. I used to be a Christian, a Catholic. I grew up and I couldn't understand the crucifixion, but it's a really great, because that's a really great symbol for spiritual death and spiritual rebirth. It makes so much sense now. Now I can understand this system of how individuals grow. I think, oh yeah, I can maybe understand what that meant. Okay, so the 5 great stages and working with karma. So Sangha Rakshita initially created a system of meditation for Triratna shortly after these lectures, which was based on these stages, integration, positive emotion, spiritual death, spiritual rebirth, and receptivity, it was called, and laid out different meditation practices that we work with in these different stages. And that's what we're going to be looking at in the coming weeks, these different meditation practices and how we work with them, to change our mind, to transform our consciousnesses. But then an obvious kind of drawback of that way of looking at meditation and the Dharma life became apparent, which is it suggests that if something is a sequence of stages, that you don't think about the later meditation practices or the later stages. You just focus on number 1. So to begin with, you do integration, then you forget about integration, then you do positive emotion, then you leave that behind, then you do some insight and spiritual death, then you leave that behind, and then you do the rebirth. And that isn't how the Dharma life works. So it's a misleading way of laying out meditation. It's not how meditation works. So more recently, Sangha Rakshita and Subhuti, one of his key order member disciples, helped. Well, we've been looking at it more in terms of 5 aspects of a Dharma life, of a Buddhist life. There's 5 aspects, and you need to be working on them all the time. You could see them as like 5 ingredients. I don't do a lot of cooking, but if you cook, you need all the ingredients. If one is missing, or you've got too much of one and not of another, it doesn't work very well. It doesn't taste very good. And the same is true of meditation and of the Dharma life. We need all 5 ingredients, all 5 elements from the outset. And what you'll find as we cover these in the coming weeks is they won't be new to you, because they're included in the introductory course and in the intermediate course. Because of this reason, we need to include elements of all of these 5 aspects right from the outset. But when you go through these different stages, there might be particular practices and particular aspects that you're focusing on, but all of them need to be present all of the time. So you could look at the lotus flower again and think of it in terms of 5 petals of a flower, and they're all opening at the same time. But the petals in the center can't open until the petals on the outside have opened fully. So integration needs to open fully before positive emotion can open fully, and then the petals inside that can open more fully. So it can work as stages, but really they're all opening all at the same time. So over the coming weeks, we're going to be looking at all these different aspects, including spiritual death and spiritual rebirth, explaining what they mean and making sense of how we need to engage with these and include them in our meditation practice. So I'm going to explain a little bit this evening about what each of these different aspects are, the different meditation practices that we use, why they're important. But in the coming weeks, we'll be spending a week on each of them. So next week, Sangha Gita will be talking about integration and the mindfulness of breathing meditation. And the week after that, we'll have an evening on positive emotion and the metta bhavana practice, and so on. Okay. So the aspect of integration is really, really, really key. And Yeah, it involves gathering, an aspect of gathering all the different parts of ourselves, all the different energies that we have, to begin unblocking all those energies that might be blocked or suppressed, harnessing them all, unifying them all, so we become a really potent individual, a really potent mind. And Sangha says, and the Buddha says, that to begin with, our mind is dissipated, our energies are dissipated, our mind is distracted. We can't focus on a particular thing, we can't commit to a particular thing, we can't follow through on things we said we're going to do. We can't act consistently in different situations. We might decide, so take, for example, you take on a precept of being generous or speaking the truth, and you might find, well, that's easy at the Buddhist Centre, but then you go to work and you find you behave differently, or you go out with your friends socially and you're a completely different person there. So integration involves becoming a consistent person who decides for themselves the kind of person they want to be, what their values are, and can act consistently regardless of the situations that they're in. Can focus their mind on something and stay on that. Their mind isn't going to get distracted and pulled off in different directions. It means taking responsibility for our own habits and starting to work with them using the law of karma. This is all this aspect of integration in the Dharma life, but the meditation practice that helps us to do this is mindfulness and the mindfulness of breathing. And we'll be exploring that next week and in the coming weeks. And you'll probably, you'll experience this already, but mindfulness of breathing trains the mind karmically to be able to decide something. We're going to follow the breath, and then notice when the mind gets distracted and bring it back and develop a sense of purpose that we can stick to. And by doing that practice over and over again over years, it harnesses our energies and our consciousness and makes it more and more potent, more and more unified, which means we can do things with it. We can do things with our mind that we couldn't do before. So the mindfulness of breathing is a potent practice, and that's the aspect of integration. And you could say the stage of integration, that first great stage. But it's not enough just to have an integrated mind. Our mind needs to become more ethical. Our heart needs to open. And this is a stage of positive emotion, and it involves a metta bhavana, which you're all familiar with. So it involves, you could say the first stage involves becoming a strong self, or gathering oneself, you could say. And then the second stage involves becoming a positive self, or expanding the self, I've said, and opening the heart. So beginning to develop emotions like kindness, love, joy, empathy, rejoicing, delighting, and appreciation. It's the material that those who've been on the weekend retreat are very familiar with. We were looking at this over the last weekend. And you'll have experienced how the metta bhavana can train your mind, train your heart to do this. So all the different categories of people that we meet, the people that we like already, well, that's easy, but the people we don't know, that's difficult. We need to train ourselves to respond with kindness, to be interested in them. And then the enemy, the person we dislike, that's even harder. We train ourselves to respond with empathy, with kindness. And over time, training ourselves in this way karmically, that becomes our response, that becomes our new response. We start to take more interest in people, we care more about people, and our heart opens up, and we experience the world differently. We experience joy, we experience more happiness. Well, the Buddha described it as like living in heaven here and now, because we have this sense of harmony with all living beings and deep love for living beings. So it's great stage of positive emotion. And the meditation practice that we do this with is, of course, the metta bhavana, which we're all familiar with. So in these two aspects, and in these, if you think of them as stages of Dharma life, you're very definitely working with karma to open your heart and train your mind in this way. Now, because of this great mistake that I talked about earlier, Sangha Gita calls it, where we have this idea of, I'm really important, me at the center of the universe, this fixed and separate self. There's an inherent danger with that, which is that you're trying to use the self, to work on the self, to overcome this sense of self, and it just doesn't work, really. You reach a point where you say that doesn't work. And there's also you need to have an ingredient in your meditation and in your Dharma life of just relaxing the self, just slowing down the self, opening up to, we'll see. So this is the aspect of receptivity, and there's a particular element of meditation and a particular practice called just sitting. And you'll hear that we introduce it sometimes at the end of meditations at Sangha Night, where we'll just say, just sit. And it just involves dropping the effort of me trying to make something happen, trying to make my mind different, trying to make my consciousness grow. Just relax that and just wait and see what happens. And it's often when you stop trying to make something happen, you create a space where something new can arise. If you're busy always trying to develop yourself and train your mind, there's actually no space for something brand new to emerge. And in meditation, it's really important to leave those spaces and to work with the amount of effort that you're making so that there's receptivity, space in your meditation for something new to arise. And then the next aspect, the next ingredients that you need in your meditation, Sangha is called spiritual death, which sounds quite heavy, doesn't it? Death, spiritual death. And this is for a particular reason. I think you could have called it other things. In other traditions, they use terms like vipassana and insight, but it's the death of that fixed, separate self. It's not that you physically die. That would be extreme, wouldn't it? That would be extreme. It's not that at all. It's that what dies is, progressively, all the things that get in the way of you feeling connected with reality and with other people, all of those have to die. The habits, the negative stories about yourself, the views, all the unskillful habits need to go. They need to drop away so that, because they're obstacles, they're barriers between you and other people, or you and the way things are. We talked about this at the retreat at the weekend. You could see it's like we're talking about metta and loving kindness. It's like one approach is that Lotus talked about trying to squeeze metta out like toothpaste out of a toothpaste tube, and this is like the attitude of like me trying to make it happen, myself willing myself to be kinder. But there's another approach which is like that loving kindness is already there, but there's lots of obstacles in the way which are our selfish habits or our wrong views, and we just need to get those out of the way, and it can flow more naturally. So spiritual death is this ingredient of stage by stage, just unpicking all of the ways that we kind of grasp tightly to ourself and to our selfishness, our ego clinging. They all need to be unpicked and let go of, and culminates in this big stage of spiritual death where there's a kind of decisive seeing through of that, freeing us, liberating ourselves from that. But we need that ingredient right from the outset. We need that element, that aspect in our Dharma life from the outset. So you remember on the week 1 of the beginner's course, we introduce the 3 lakshanas. In a different form, we say we can change, happiness comes from inside, and we're interconnected. And then week 6, we teach them as the traditional list of impermanence, no fixed self, and dukkha. So the key wisdom teachings, the insight teachings we give from the outset, they're not something we wait until stage 4 of the Dharma life in like 30 years and then you practice insight. It's there from the outset, and we're going to explore in the coming weeks how you can bring that into your meditation. You can bring impermanence and Atman and dukkha and other reflections into your meditation. So you're starting to use meditation to see through these obstacles and to let go of them. So we'll be looking at that in the coming weeks as well. And then the aspect of spiritual rebirth involves, if the stage of spiritual death is seeing through the self, we are, I didn't know how to describe this, but I'd say relating to forces that transcend the self. That sounds quite weird, doesn't it? But in this is the aspect where we relate to embodiments that represent our true potential. So it might involve visualizing the Buddha, who represents the goal of enlightenment, our true potential, our highest potential. It could involve chanting mantras that connect us to that truest potential, puja, devotion practices. And traditionally, order members take up a daily practice of visualization, which is connecting us to the goal of Buddhism. Again, but it's something that needs to be there from the outset, and we'll explore how you can bring elements of this into your meditation practice. Okay, so in a way, I'm setting the scene this evening by laying out these different ingredients of the Dharma life, our system of meditation. And what I would like to say, I suppose, is that I think this is fantastic. This is a fantastic toolkit, how to meditate in all these different ways. And the more I've got to know about it, I can see how different meditation practices that are used in other traditions fit into this system. It really helps to make sense of what meditation is. And these 5 different ways that we need to work in meditation really, really clearly, and we'll get to see a taste of that over the next 5 weeks. These are 5 really important ways we need to work in meditation and learn more about. So if this is all new to you, don't worry. You've got a lifetime ahead of you where you can get to know more about meditation, how to work in these different areas. But we're just setting the scene about, anyway, answering this question of Sangha. Do you understand what meditation is? Do you understand what it's really for? Do you understand how to work in meditation? And we're going to help you over the next few weeks to understand more about meditation and to talk more about meditation. But I just wanted to revisit the 5 stages that I talked about earlier. And this kind of, because it does feed into every meditation you do in a way, the same question. All aspects of your Dharma life, the same question will arise. And it's this question, it's this kind of koan, this paradox I mentioned earlier. Is it me, is it myself doing the work to overcome myself? Or is it something from outside of me that's doing it? Because that urge that I talked about right at the start when I was in Newcastle, that urge to grow, that longing. Looking back at times, I think, well, was that coming from me, or was it more like a calling? Was something calling to me? Was it wisdom? Was it reality? Was something trying to say to me, there's more to life than this. Life has more than this. There's this urge, this kind of desire to this dissatisfaction with what life was. Where does that come from? What is it? Is it an urge from within me? Is it a kind of a deep wisdom within me? Is it something beyond me calling, saying, wake up, this job is rubbish, do something with your life. It doesn't matter about the leaflets, go and do something meaningful with your life. Where does that come from? Who, and what is, are we working with the laws of karma? Yeah, we definitely are. But there comes a point where we need to cooperate with what seems to be other forces in meditation, higher states of consciousness that open up to us in meditation. Where do they come from? What are they? I'm not going to give any answers, but it's a bit of a koan, a bit of a mystery. And I think the Buddha gave metaphors which could give you both ways of looking at it. He talked about training the mind in terms of the same way that farmers irrigate water. They dig channels and they steer water in different ways. He said, in the same way that irrigators divert water, a wise person trains their mind. So you could see that in the metta bhavana, in the mindfulness of breathing. We're diverting our mind in a more ethical direction. We're moving our kind of unskillful, unethical habits, and we're retraining our mind to focus in a positive direction and in a skillful direction. So we're training the mind, we're irrigating the mind. But the Buddha also said in the Anguttara Nikaya that the mind is luminous and it's covered over by defilements. And that creates a sense where you've got this kind of like glowing, shiny mind, but it's all mucky and it's covered over by all unskillful habits. And the kind of job of meditation, the job of ethics is to kind of remove all of that muck so that this innate luminosity, this kind of, all of these skillful qualities are kind of there but covered up, they can shine. So the Buddha talked about it in different ways. And I just want to share, by way of closing really, a short story and poem that just evoke a little bit about this point on the Dharma life. You can reach a stage on the Dharma life where it can feel like it's a classic stage in the Dharma life that talks about over centuries, over like thousands of years of people practicing the Dharma life, where you realize the self can't get you there. You can't make yourself enlightened. You can reach a certain point, but then the self can't do it. You can't do it yourself. You need to cooperate with something that isn't the self. But that's what it feels like. And there was a story of a famous Buddhist, enlightened being, how to describe a saint really, called Xuanzang from China. Very, very famous Buddhist. And apparently he had a dream that he recorded. And he dreamt one night that there was this amazing mountain, and he just longed to get to the top of it. He had this urge to get to the top of this mountain. It was so amazing. He just had this really intense desire to get to the top of this mountain. So in his dream, the mountain was separated by an ocean. He just jumped into the ocean and started to swim across and got to the other side of the ocean. And now he could start to climb the mountain, and he began to climb, and he was so excited, but then found that he just slipped down to the bottom. He got up a little bit so far and then just slipped back to the bottom. The mountain was so slippy, it was like glass. He couldn't get up. And he sat at the bottom and wept. He sat at the bottom of the mountain and wept, and realized something. In his dream, he had this intuition. It was to do his own shortcomings in a way, his own kind of Subhuti in this talk described it as kind of wretchedness. He just sits there and weeps, realizes he can't get to the top of this mountain. And as he does that, this gust of wind picks up in his dream, starts to blow, and then carries Xuanzang up to the top of the mountain. And there's a teaching in Xuanzang's dream, which is that we need to make loads of effort. This kind of swimming across the ocean is all the work we need to do to transform our mind, to transform our heart, in meditation, outside of meditation. We need to make loads of effort using the law of karma. But there comes a point where we also need to be open in our meditation, in our Dharma life, to higher states of consciousness that seem to arise, in dependence on certain conditions, but from it. It seems like they come from outside of our usual experience. We need to be open and receptive to that wind. And Sangha Rakshita said his experience was that when he was founding the order, he felt like something was founding the order through him. It wasn't that he himself was founding the order. He just happened to be the only person in the 60s who was in a position to do that, and it really needed to happen. Maybe it could only have happened in that short window of time. And he felt like something was manifesting through him, something was expressing through him, maybe wisdom and compassion, those forces, founding the order through him. And it was also the people who founded the Buddhist Centre, got this building 25 years ago. They remember speaking to Mogavangsa about it, and Vidanya and others said it's amazing how it came together, this kind of group of order members with different qualities. How did they make this happen? And it felt like something wanted it to happen, something was trying to manifest and kind of create this centre and this community here. And Sangha Rakshita wrote a poem about this called The Wind, and I'll just read that poem out. Subhuti, who gave a wonderful series of talks about these aspects of the Dharma life. He said that Sangha Rakshita wrote to him and described how the movement was founded. He experienced as though the movement was founded through him, and he wasn't the best person to found it, he just had to. And he said it was as though this wind had begun blowing through him and has carried on to blow through our order and our movement. And he wrote this poem: "A wind was in my sails, it blew, stronger and fiercer hour by hour. I did not know from whence it came or why, I only knew its power. Sometimes it dashed me on the rocks, sometimes it spun me round and round. Sometimes I laughed aloud for joy, sometimes I felt a peace profound. It drove me on, that manic wind, when I was young, it drives me still. Now I am old, it lives in me, its breath my breath, its will my will." a very moving poem Sangha actually wrote as an old man, just about how, it gives a glimpse into his Dharma life, really, and his journey through those stages, trying to cooperate with this wind, with these forces of Dharma that we have to cooperate with. And I was thinking, well, you might, some of you are brand new to Buddhism, and this might sound really weird and kind of like, what's he going on about? What's Bodhinaga talking about? And some people have been coming for a while might be thinking that as well. Parts of today I was thinking that as well. But I was thinking, well, whether you experience it as this urge to grow, I'm imagining we all relate to that. We've all experienced this urge to find meaning in our lives or to grow our consciousness, to transform ourselves. We've all experienced that to different extents. And that's, I'm imagining, why we've come, the dissatisfaction of not knowing how to find that and how to find expression to that. And Buddhism gives that. It gives us these 4 gifts. And the first one is a method of how to develop our consciousness, how to grow, how to meditate. And it gives us this system and these 5 aspects. That's the wrong way. It's these 5 elements to include in our meditation. And whether you relate to it as an urge that's coming from within you, or a calling of something from without you, or whether it's you that's doing the work, or you're cooperating with something that transcends you or beyond you, maybe you could imagine a wiser you is calling you, a wiser you that knows that, is calling you to make better choices with your life, make ethical choices, wiser choices, become the person that you could become, to fulfill your potential, to become wiser, to become kinder. There's a calling or an urging, whether it's coming from outside or from within you. And what might that wiser you be saying? What might that voice of wisdom be saying? It might be saying, I come to you with 4 gifts. The first gift is a lotus flower. Do you understand? My second gift is a golden net. Can you recognize it? My third gift is a shepherd's round dance. Do your feet know how to dance? My fourth gift is a garden planted in a wilderness. Could you work there? I come to you with 4 gifts. Dare you accept them? Okay.